Hey there, MOMnation, and welcome back to another episode of our love story with the amazing Dyanna. Hello, Dyanna.
Hi, how are you?
Awesome. Welcome to the show yet again.
Thank you.
I love these talks, and I've got to tell you, they really are so helpful for our audience members out there. I know it because I get the feedback, I get the DMs. Thank you guys so much for sharing with me when something really hits home for you. It's very helpful for Dyanna and I because it does help us to sort of steer the content toward what you guys are wanting and needing. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I know that you're finding value in the videos because, again, I get the feedback. So if you guys could, if you haven't yet, just reach up and hit that subscribe button or the follow button on whatever platform you are listening or watching on. And that sends us even more confirmation that, Dyanna, we really just need to keep showing up for these ladies.
That's it. That's what we need to do.
Sure do. This episode, this topic probably plays very well with the last episode that we did. And we're going to dive into something that I think is going to hit a home again for a lot of women, because we're talking about something that, and Dyanna, you can chime in on this, that I feel like people kind of avoid saying out loud, and that's intimate boundaries in marriage. Like, how often do we have,
right?
Yeah. How often do we have that conversation with each other? Like, as in, our mama community, our wife community, our female community. But how often do we really have that with our spouse?
Not as often, that's for sure.
And somewhere along the way, I feel like we were taught, maybe not all of us, but some of us were taught that being a good wife means ignoring my own needs, means discomfort, means ignoring my emotions, or just doing the things, just jumping like through the hoops to keep the peace.
Means anybody like that? Self-abandonment.
Yeah, that's the term. I knew you'd come up with the right term for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of women's experience, and it's not exclusively a female experience, right? But I think for the sake of what we're talking about right now, yes, we have been socially and culturally conditioned to do the things to, cause the least amount of conflict and, make sure that everyone in our household is happy, with us coming last.
Yeah, man, I just trying to think back in life as to like when I learned that, because I would absolutely say that I was conditioned in that way as well. And that's no shade to the conditioners, right? Or the experiences that I went through that conditioned me to that. It happened. And it definitely does come out for me in relationships. And one thing that really comes out a bunch is that intimacy without emotional safety, connection, trust, mutual respect, that kind of thing can leave us as women. And to your point, Dyanna, people in general can leave us feeling unseen instead of loved, right?
Definitely. We can definitely feel invisible when we've been a willing participant in our own self-abandonment.
So today we're opening up an honest conversation about emotional connection, pressure, obligation, communication, consent within marriage. That's the tie-in part to the last episode, and what healthy intimacy looks like behind closed doors. And with that, I would love to open the conversation with my very first question for you, Dyanna, and it's a big one. Can you help us understand why emotional safety is such a huge part of intimacy for many women?
Yeah, absolutely. For starters, like, women are much more engaged in responsive desire rather than spontaneous desire. And again, this isn't like all encompassing, but statistically speaking, right? Like, women are much more responsive to desire, which means we have to be connected with, we have to feel that emotional connection. We have to feel the emotional intimacy and the safety. And to clarify about emotional safety, it's like, I need to know that if I come to you with any sort of information that could be construed as negative, that I'm not going to be punished for it. And that you're going to be okay with it. And even if you're disappointed, like that's okay, but that there's not going to be a big reaction in which I'm going to be punished, stonewalling, yelling, verbal or emotional abuse, like any of those things. And when there's an absence of emotional safety, that's when conflicts don't really come up, because we would rather just, run the cost benefit analysis here and decide that that isn't really worth it for me. So why is emotional safety so important when it comes to intimacy? Is that if I don't feel comfortable and vulnerable with you just like on a regular basis, what makes you think that I'm going to feel comfortable and vulnerable with no clothes on?
Right.
And so that emotional connection, that emotional safety and intimacy is required for many women to even entertain the idea of intimacy. And when there is a lack of emotional safety, you can see it come up in some ways that don't really look the way that you expect them to, but are still a way for women to self-abandon in favor of making sure that their partner is happy with the frequency of intimacy, and all of that good stuff. Sometimes even women convince themselves that like, oh, I've never rejected him because like I could never do that because I want to like all the time. And it's like, okay, I hear you, but like, do you though? Like as a normal human being, right? Like we sometimes have needs and wants, and sometimes we don't have those needs and wants. And is that coming from a protective place in you to say like, oh, I would never turn him down because like, I just like want him all the time, which if that's you, like, great, that's fine. But
Perfect.
Is that a defense mechanism to like, oh no, like I couldn't deny him intimacy because of what might happen. Because if he receives that as rejection, then basically I'm going to be punished for it with again, negative mood, stonewalling, verbal abuse, like any of those things, right? So sometimes we even go as far as to convince ourselves that we're not actually doing that. Like this is something we want to do. This is something that we like, in order to help protect ourselves.
That's huge. You said a lot right there. A lot of value and very well in a very easy to understand way. So thank you for doing that. Back to, yes, I totally can understand how somebody that doesn't feel emotionally and even physically, mentally safe in regular life probably isn't going to in the bedroom either. I totally get that part. And I want to dive deeper into that. But before we do that, there's so many posts that I see out there on social media that are asking the general audience. So maybe it's in a mom's group or a wives group or something like that. Like, how many times do you visit the bedroom a week, a month? And they're like comparing themselves to one another. And that seems weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a threshold there? I mean, I would think no.
No, it's really subjective. What every individual couple's expectations are for intimacy is very subjective. It's based on what they want. It's their relationship, right? So comparing one relationship to the next is a really quick way to make yourself feel very inadequate or to feel like there's something wrong with your relationship, right? But I think that women put such a heavy emphasis on putting a pulse check on frequency of intimacy because we feel like it's expected of us. And when we're met with disappointment, with like, like the feeling of rejection, then we feel bad about ourselves. And then we're just like, oh, I don't want to do that again. So like, I'm going to make sure that I am, for a lack of a better word, compliant, or make sure that, I am in charge of his overall happiness and satisfaction. And so when we get that negative feedback from our partners, I think it's natural for us to reach out to other people to find out, like, it's a kind of like am I the asshole thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it me, or is there like other people that are also experiencing this same kind of thing? And so again, comparison, as they say, is a thief of joy, right? But it's a really quick way to put our own selves down or to question ourselves and listen to our own instincts less. So it's natural that we do that. But I would have to wonder, like, whoever is reaching out and, asking for those comparisons, like, where is this really coming from? Is this really coming from like a conflict, an argument, a lack of consent, a lack of vulnerability? Like, there's something going on within the relationship much deeper than just sex and intimacy that, begs to take a look at,
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what you just said also, part of that response triggers another question for me. But do you think that some couples confuse marriage with entitlement when it comes to intimacy?
Definitely. Definitely. I think there is certainly an undercurrent in a lot of relationships or a lot of committed relationships, marriage or otherwise, that physical intimacy is like, I'm entitled to that. And so
Right.
I'm entitled to you. I'm entitled to intimacy. I'm entitled to your body, like all of those things. And that can be very dangerous for both people involved, because then consent becomes a big question mark. In fact, it kind of goes out the window in some situations, right? Where it's no longer about consent. It's about, this is what we're supposed to do because we're married and this is how it's supposed to be, right? And so that entitlement quickly can turn into, in some situations, forms of abuse, right? And when there is already a cycle there of withholding information because there isn't emotional safety, then people are really putting themselves in dangerous situations by saying no so that they don't. But again, I think socially, culturally, women are expected to, we can't win in so many situations, right?
Yeah.
If women are, engaging in a lot of emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, I mean, like in a lot of sex, it's like, oh, she's, all these derogatory words, what I mean, that we
Things.
won't say on here.
Yeah.
But like, that's what's wrong with her. She's terrible. But then it's like, oh, you guys are only having sex like once a week. Like, oh, is she frigid? Like, what's wrong with her? You know what I mean? So it's like,
Hmm.
we can't win. And then we have the male reinforcement of, not wanting to feel lonely or rejected in their relationships, and sometimes lack the skills to communicate that that's how they're feeling. And then it only comes out in, oh, well, is my value and my worth just in my physical body in order to make
Right.
you happy? And then
Right.
we just miss the plot entirely.
Entirely. And I feel like there's this whole like train of thought that was around when I was growing up, where you did that with your husband because you were the wife and that was like your job.
That was your role. Mm-hmm.
Is there still that whole school of thought? I mean, I know that it exists because it probably grew with many of us, but like, is that still a thing? People still talk about that?
Unfortunately, yeah, it's much more, I think, in some cases latent than just completely obvious. But we, as you said, like we heard it growing up from various unhealthy sources that like, this is what you do to keep a man happy. And if you
Yeah.
want to be in a relationship for a long time, like this is what you have to do. And it's very misogynistic, right? But if those are the sources that we're getting our information from, then we're going to definitely carry out a lot of those behaviors, a lot of those thought processes without stopping to think like, does this work for me? And is
Mm,
this serving me? Or am I abandoning myself to make somebody else happy in the most vulnerable way possible?
yeah. So, how would you suggest couples communicate their needs with each other, surrounding feeling rejected or the other feeling obligated? Like, how does that conversation happen? And again, I know everybody's different, so it's probably case by case, but how does that conversation happen in a valuable way?
Yeah, it's a great question. Requires tools, requires, emotional intelligence to a degree, requires the tools to communicate the tough stuff, right? Intimacy is like one of those hot ticket items in every relationship that can cause a lot of conflict, but we aren't necessarily all equipped to have those conversations. Instead, they come out as something else. They come out as like, well, we haven't had sex in a while. Oh, well,
Mm,
sorry, I've been busy. I've been doing this or that. I haven't felt good, yada, yada, yada. And then the conversation stops, right? And then it's just like,
mm,
well, we need to, or whatever. And then she's like, okay, well, if I do this with him now, it'll probably get him off my back, at least for a
mm,
week or two, you know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? Which is terrible because we don't want to
Terrible.
use intimacy as a like check the box sort of situation, right? But being able to be vulnerable and curious enough to dig deeper as to like what's going on, right? Like, okay, like it's been a week, no bigs. 2 weeks, it's been busy. Okay, it's been like a month. Like, what's going on? Like, this isn't coming from a like, you owe this to me now and I'm sexually frustrated, you know what I mean? But like, there's got to be something else going on that I'm missing. So like, let's talk about it. I don't want to just know why we're not being physically intimate, but I want to know what's going on. Like, physical intimacy is, again, as we know, tied to emotional intimacy. And like, this is just a symptom of a bigger problem. So we see the symptom. We don't want to just treat the symptom with sex. We want to find out what's going on, diagnose the issue to prevent it from happening the same way again, or in other ways that are similar. And so that requires a lot of vulnerability and curiosity and looking past the like immediate feeling of rejection, with a lot of people struggle with, right? A lot of people struggle with that, my value and my worth. And if I'm not getting it physically, then that means something's wrong with me. I'm being rejected. Even more amplified, which, side quest, but even more amplified if there's a history of, sexual abuse and trauma in somebody's childhood. And so that can overcomplicate things too, to a different degree. But not having those tools to communicate about it really just oversimplifies the situation. So that's one way to talk about it, is really getting curious about like what's going on underneath this. It has much more to do with physical intimacy. The other part that I would really wonder too is when couples are talking about this is really asking themselves, and even each other too, like, how often are we physically affectionate outside of sex? Right? Like how affectionate are we? Like, are we holding hands? Are we cuddling? Are we, giving a back rub without any intention of it going anywhere else? Right? And if the answer is no, well, that's certainly contributing to, the intimacy situation in your relationship right now, right? Because if we start to translate, our brain makes connections, right? Pattern recognition. And so if every time he or she is coming up and, rubbing my back or have their hand on my leg, like, I know what that means. I don't want to. So I don't feel good. I have a headache, or I have stuff to do. I gotta go cook dinner. I gotta go do whatever. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, what's going on? Why are you rejecting me? Well, let's roll the tape back and see, like, how are we affectionate outside of sex? Because I'm going to reject all of that touch if I think that's the only reason that you're touching me, right? There should be a really good balance of physical affection that has nothing to do with sex and relationships. Otherwise, the wires get crossed and all touch gets confused for intimacy. And then people can sometimes start to feel used or feel like their worth or their value is just in like, what can you do for me right now in the physical capacity?
Yeah. Oh, and that just like weighs on me just having that conversation.
It's heavy.
It's really heavy. You mentioned a couple of these signs throughout the conversation, but I'm curious if there are any other signs that come to mind that that show that intimacy has become transactional instead of emotionally connected.
Yeah, it becomes transactional when somebody decides like it's time. They aren't having a pulse check on the overall health of the relationship, and just expecting that like everything is going to be, right here, right now, or whenever you want. But, there's this saying that I've heard several times over the years that is kind of applicable in some ways, where it's like, foreplay starts at breakfast, right? And it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that like, have you been emotionally connected throughout the day? Yes, people work, that's fine. But like, text messages, or, hey, I love you. Hey, how much time are we spending on saying goodbye? How much time are we spending saying hello? How much time are we spending having conversations throughout the day? Are you coming in and plopping yourself on the couch? Are you coming in and helping with dinner, or taking the kids outside, helping with homework? Like, how involved are you throughout the day so that you don't end up being another thing on the to-do list, right? Literally and figuratively, right? So when there is an emotional connection throughout the day and it looks like there's like intention behind it, and it has to be consistent, right? Otherwise, this just turns into the physical touch thing, right?
Right.
You have to be consistent and not just show up in those ways just when you want to be intimate. You know what I mean? And so that way women feel very emotionally connected when they feel like their partner is showing up, when they're showing up in other emotional ways. Now, we talk about this a lot in couples therapy, right? And sometimes men walk away with this idea or ask the question about the idea of like, well, that sounds like, what have you done for me lately? Or like, so I have to do this in order to get this. And, sometimes it's like, Well, kind of. It's not about a what have you done for me lately? It's not that. It's in order for you to get the physical affection that you're looking for, like she's got to feel the emotional connection and the intimacy too. So what are you contributing to this? This isn't just like, very rarely, I should say, is this just a situation where, she's just not wanting to for whatever reason. But very rarely is that the case when there's a strong emotional connection. Now, another side quest, there's things going on such as like, high stress, high cortisol situations, hormonal fluctuations over time.
Yes.
Same woman that you got with when she was 20 is not going to be the same when she's 40, right? And that is an
No, ma'am.
act to love and re-love over and over again the same person in all the different versions that they are going to be, without even an opportunity to get to say goodbye to the one that was there. But now you have a new version in her place, and you have a choice. You can love that person that's there or not, but you have to intentionally love that version, all the versions that show up, right? And so in different stages of life, that's definitely going to play a part in that, as well as undiagnosed mental health conditions. There's so many other side quests that we can go down as to why, like, there's struggles with intimacy and relationships, but, I'll keep it, into this lane of the emotional intimacy. But a lot of men do hear that, like, so I have to do this in order to get this. And it's like, well, are you curious about how to be more emotionally connected with your partner? Because if you're not curious at all, what are we doing here? Like, what are we talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you could literally get sex anywhere, right? Like it
Anywhere.
really is that easy, right? But like, if you're looking to have that intimacy with your partner, with your spouse, then a certain level of curiosity is required to look past the physical and again be like, this is a symptom of a different diagnosis, and like, let's figure what this thing is and what is my role in it. How can I be accountable? And that doesn't mean that this is my fault. It doesn't mean that I am to blame, but there's clearly something going on here, and neither one of us are getting what we want out of it, right? So there's that curiosity sometimes that's really hard to get to because it's very vulnerable, right? It's very vulnerable to hold yourself accountable. It's very vulnerable to hear your partner say, hey, I often don't feel emotionally connected with you because, I'm home all day with the kids, cooking and cleaning and doing the laundry and doing all this stuff. And you come home and then you just sit on the couch, or you go lay down or do whatever. And like, I start to feel very lonely, and then I'm touched out and I'm tired and I haven't showered. And then, you're coming over and you're touching me. And it's like, this is just another thing on my list of things that I have to make sure are running smoothly in the house. Now you've become a checkbox, right? And who wants that? Nobody wants that. You know what I mean? Nobody wants that sort of performative level of intimacy. So in order to avoid that, it's going to require some emotional intelligence on your part to understand like what's really going on here.
That makes so much sense. Thank you for explaining that. What do you say to women who feel guilty for needing emotional connection before intimacy?
There's nothing to feel guilty about. There's absolutely nothing to feel guilty about. Everyone deserves emotional safety. Everyone deserves emotional intimacy. And if you are not getting that in your relationship, or you don't know how to get that or how to ask for that, like, open up the conversation with your partner, you know what I mean? And see if this is something that they're willing to explore with you, whether it be, in couples counseling, or whether it be in individual counseling or whatever, just so that you guys can learn the tools to talk to each other about this stuff differently. But don't ever allow someone to make you feel guilty, which you can't feel guilty without your own permission, right? But
True.
You don't deserve to feel guilty for needing or wanting anything. Like, this is your life too. This is your relationship too. And you're entitled to feel happy and fulfilled and valued and cared for, regardless of what the request is.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. And I'm sure the world does too. Because we have enough guilt, Dyanna. We have enough to feel guilty about. We don't need to add this onto
Mom wars are alive and well.
100%. Totally agree. Last question, and I think this might be a bit of a doozy, so save the best for last. So that all being said, what does healthy, mutually respectful intimacy look like in a long-term marriage, Dyanna?
Talking about it a lot. being able to have really comfortable, vulnerable communication about intimacy so that nobody is wondering what the other person is thinking. There's no room for resentment to grow. Talking about expectations is great. And expectations is a really prickly word when you talk about intimacy, because it shouldn't be like, well, we should be having sex twice a week, 3 times a week. No, I'm talking about expectations where, like, okay, if I say no because like I don't want to, that I expect that you're going to be cool, calm, and collected, and you can be disappointed because you're a human being and you can have all the emotions you want, but I don't get to be punished for them. So I expect that from you. I expect that you're going to be cool and that this isn't going to turn into a big conflict, right? And you can also expect from me that, like, if I am feeling some type of way, that I'm going to be open and transparent with you so you know exactly what's going on, right? So that shouldn't be this like questioning or like, oh man, when are we going to have this conversation again? When are we going to have to do this again? And like waiting for the conflicts to come up because we're afraid to talk about it. So open, honest, and frequent communication about intimacy throughout various seasons of your life is what's going to create that sustainability in intimacy. Because again, like, there's so many seasons in our lives that are going to affect physical intimacy too. And if we're not constantly like talking about it and getting the reassurance from our partner that they are still curious and still really wanting to know what's going on in your world, if we don't have that, we are just going to lean back to performative, and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. And, you know, with that, with the communication conversation, I think that I heard you say it's also important to be open to hearing your partner and not making assumptions about what they might be thinking or feeling or what their reasons for their actions or their thoughts and feelings are.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's an important piece to communication too, that maybe we don't often talk about, is being a good listener.
Being a good listener without allowing your shame or ego to prevent you from hearing it. Right? So if there's shame or ego involved and it's, well, we haven't been intimate in a while, it must be because, you know, you're into somebody else, or you don't find me attractive, or any of those things. And it's like, hold on, buddy. Like, I never said anything about that. You know what I mean? You're making assumptions about how I feel. And now I'm here left abandoning my feelings to take care of you. Right. Yeah. So like, forget what I had to say. Like, now I have to make sure that you're okay and that you're feeling accepted and not rejected and valued and all of those things, because you aren't able to keep your own shame and your own ego in check long enough to just be curious and ask me, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Thank you again for making what, honestly, as I was anticipating this episode, I was feeling like it was a bit complex, and it probably is. But thank you for helping break it down into bite-sized pieces that were easy to digest and understand. So I appreciate that very much. Absolutely. Anything else on this topic before we say goodbye today?
I encourage anyone that's listening that any of this resonates with you, like, just talk to them. You know, obviously, like, this is all barring, you know, any disclaimer, right? Like, no physical safety concerns or violence concerns. And that's completely different conversation.
That's different.
Not the one we're having right here.
Right.
But, you know, talk to your partner about it. See if they're open to getting some additional support. Somebody who's objective that can help do some of the translating between, you know, because it's not a communication issue, it's a safety issue, right? And by safety, again, we mean emotional safety, right? So all the time when I hear from couples, like, you know, we need help, you know, communicating better, or we need, you know, better conflict resolution skills. And like, all those things are true. But 9 times out of 10, when I hear like, we're just not as intimate as we used to be, I'm like, okay, there's something else going on here. So if it is just an intimacy issue in your relationship, talk to your partner about it and see if they're willing to like dig a little deeper with you to find out like, what is it that we're missing? And if they are not willing, there is so much value you can get in individual counseling too, to learn about yourself, your own attachment style, your own level of safety, emotional safety, what you've learned about your own emotional safety, how comfortable it is for you to be vulnerable. Like, there's so much there to be gained on an individual basis too. But having somebody like objective that can help translate the messages between you and your partner is sometimes really helpful, in as much as it's uncomfortable talking to a complete stranger about your sex life, right? Like I totally get that. But if it means a difference between we go another 10 years just doing it the way that we're doing it, or we're uncomfortable for a little bit and we walk away with some better tools to talk about it, you'll benefit so much more in the long term for the immediate short-term discomfort.
I totally agree. Now, we all know that couples are your thing.
Couples are my thing.
Correct me if I'm inaccurate with this, but I believe you do have expertise in the whole intimacy. Can you explain that real quick?
Yeah, so I'm sex therapy informed, which
Thank you. That's what it was.
About intimacy and how that plays a role in the relationship as well.
Awesome. And as far as any of our audience members, friends, followers that might want to connect with you, maybe come in to see you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, if you go onto my website, it's DyannaEiselTherapy.com. You can just click on the schedule a free consultation button. I offer a free 15-minute phone consultation where we get to connect. I'll answer all of your questions. I get to learn a little bit about you. And that is a perfect start to just, getting the vibe check going. You know what I mean? Before you come in and we get to meet.
I love that you do that, because I have talked to women that do like to, like you said, vibe check it. They want to make sure if they're coming in to speak to a professional that is, they're going to be sharing some deep things with, that they feel that is a good connection. So I really appreciate that you are aware of that, you're sensitive to that, and that you also offer that without them feeling like the meter is running. Because honestly, like, the meter runs for absolutely everything we do. And it's just nice to have that relief, because I'm sure that you have spoken to many people who need to be budget conscious. And so I love that you do that. So thank you.
Absolutely. It also helps pave the way for people who aren't familiar with the therapy process. You know what I mean? Everyone has like an image in their head of like what this is going to look like. So to be able to have a 15-minute conversation with like an actual human being to talk about like what your concerns are, what your questions are, really helps to like destigmatize, what therapy can look like, that it doesn't have to look like the way it looks in the movies and stuff. You know what I mean? That it's an actual human being on the other side that just has, different experience, different education profession that you do. But at the end of the day, like, we're all humans, and it's nice to have that connection ahead of time.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. And guys, if you want to check out any of our previous episodes, and you do, hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. Scroll down just a little ways. You will see the Our Love Story playlist. That is 3.5 years or so of episodes with Dyanna and I. So very, very binge worthy. If you prefer to listen podcast style on your favorite podcast platform, please do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. There you'll find us. Download, click the notification bell, all the things. You'll never miss a beat. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Dyanna.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Struggling to reconnect with yourself or the ones you love? Meet Dyanna Eisel, a licensed marriage and family therapist, here to support your journey toward connection and clarity. She helps you feel seen, heard, and supported as you grow through life's challenges, emotionally, sexually, and relationally. A safe, judgment-free space where growth can begin. Come as you are and grow into who you're becoming. Reach out today and take your first step toward healing with Dyanna.